Hello students, let us discuss let us have a brief note on the chapter organism and population. But before we get into organisms and population, let us see about ecology. Okay, so what is ecology? The branch of biology or the science which deals with the interaction among the organisms and its physical environment. You call it as ecology. The branch ecology is also called as environmental biology or hexecology or ethology. The term ecology was been coined by Ernst Haeckel in the year 1866, and it is derived from a Greek word called as ikios, which means house or dwelling. Logos means a study or science. But authentic use of the term ecology was been done by writer in the year 1885. Alexander von Humboldt is called as the father of ecology, and whereas Eugene P. Odium is called as the father of modern ecology. Ramdeo Mishra is revered as the father of Indian ecology. He obtained his PhD in ecology from the Lead University in UK, established training and research in ecology at Banaras Hindu University, Varanasi. Mishra formulated the first PG course in ecology in India. He was honored with the fellowship of the Indian National Science Academy and World Academy of Arts and Science. He has also been honored with the prestigious Sanjay Gandhi Award in Environment and Ecology. Okay. Due to his efforts, the Government of India has established the National Committee for Environmental Planning and Coordination in 1972, and in later years paved the way for the establishment of the Ministry of Environment and Forests. Okay, so this was about the brief introduction to ecology. Next, coming to the next is the branches. There are two branches of ecology. One is the autoecology. Autoecology refers to the study of relationship between the environment and an organism or a species, whereas synecology is the study of relationship between the environment and the organism and the community. Andre, in synecology, it is the relationship between the environment and the community. It is not single species or an organisms, but it is a community, whereas autoecology is only the relationship between the environment and an individual organism or a species. Okay, that is autoecology. So now let us move on to the first chapter under ecology, that is the organisms and populations. Okay, so organisms and population, in this chapter we will be understanding about both the organism as well as a population. Now when you look at the world around, remember the world is very fascinatingly diverse and amazingly complex. Means it is fascinatingly diverse means you have different types of organisms. Okay, and it is simultaneously very complex. Now how to understand this complex? It is only by investigating. How do you investigate? You investigate at the various biological level organization. What are the different levels of biological organization? They are macro molecules, cells, tissues, organs, individual organism, population, communities, ecosystem, and the biomes. Okay, so these are all the different levels that you see in a biological community, or maybe under a biological hierarchy. Okay, now let us see about the right, already we have seen about the different hierarchy. Now when you see here, we can broadly classify this hierarchy in nature as physical hierarchy. Physical hierarchy mainly includes proton, neutrons, electrons, or together forming atoms, then compounds, and then macromolecules. Biological hierarchy includes the cells forming the tissue forming the organs, and the organ system, and then the organism. Whereas the ecological hierarchy involves the population, biotic, and the biotic components, then ecosystem, biosphere. This forms the ecological hierarchy. So in organism and population chapter, we are not studying about the physical or the biological hierarchy, but basically we are going to study about the ecological hierarchy. Okay, now we have to know is at any level of biological organization, we can speak of two questions. Okay, when you are speaking, when you are investigating at each level of biological organization, we come across two questions: how and why. How type generally helps us to understand the mechanism behind the process, whereas why type of questions help us to seek the significance of the process. When we hear the bulbul singing early in the morning in the garden, we may ask, how does this bird sing, or why does this bird sing? Okay, right? When you see that, how does the bird sing, right? it is mainly because of the what you call it as the vibrating sound of the voice box, or maybe you can say it is the vibrating bones in the birds which will produce the sound. Whereas why question can be answered, right? Why does the bulbul generally sing during the morning? Okay, it is mainly to communicate with its mate for the breeding purpose during the breeding season. This is how the why and how questions have been answered. Okay, now let us see another few examples. Why are night blooming flowers generally white? Why are they white? It is because during the night they do not have to waste resources to secrete out colored pigments to be visible to the insect at night. White color refracts the light which makes them visible. Whereas, how does the bee know which flower has the nectar? It is mainly because of the electrical charges that are being emitted by the flower. Okay, by this you see that the bee is able to recognize the flower which has the nectar. Then coming to the next example, right? When you see the next example is the cactus. That is, why does the cactus have so many thorns? Why does it has the thorns? There are two reasons for this. One is mainly to prevent the loss of water by reducing the airflow close to the cactus. And how does the chick recognize her own mother, and so on? Okay, how does it recognize? It is by a process called as imprinting, and this imprinting process involves hearing, then vision, and then olfactory along with the touch. Okay, so these are some of the how and the why questions that generally arise when we are investigating at the various biological levels. So already we have seen what is ecology. It is a subject which will help in studying the interaction among the organisms and between the organisms and its physical environment. Now, ecological level of organization, please remember there are four levels. One is organism, second is population, third is community, whereas the fourth one is the biomes. What is a biome? Biome is the largest regional unit characterized by a major vegetation type and associated fauna found in a specific climatic zone. Andre, it is a large regional unit comprising of both the plants as well as the animals with the specific climatic zone. Okay, so some of the examples for the biome are the terrestrial biomes, that is desert, temperate deciduous forest, then tropical rainforest. Okay, then apart right, you see, then about the biosphere, all the ecosystem of the world are collectively called as the biosphere, which mainly consists of the atmosphere, the land, ocean, river, lakes, where all the living organisms live. Ecology at the organismic level is essentially we are trying to understand the physiological ecology, which try to understand how different organisms will adapt themselves to the environment, and thus will which will help them to survive and as well as to reproduce. We know there is a seasonal changes occurring in the environment. How does it? The rotation of our planet around the sun and the tilt of its axis cause the annual variation in the intensity and the duration of the temperature, resulting in distinct seasons. These variations, together with the annual variation in the precipitation, which generally include both the rain as well as the snow, accounts for the major biomes, you can tell. Okay, right? You see that how does different habitat or maybe different biomes arise? It is mainly due to the regional changes, and that too due to the intensity and the temperature and as well as the precipitation. And as a result, you see there are different biomes formed. So what are these different biomes? Arctic and alpine tundra, coniferous forest, temperate forest, tropical forest, grassland, and desert, depending upon their mean annual temperature and as well as their mean annual precipitation. So the major in India, which are the major biomes? The major biomes of India are tropical rainforest, deciduous forest, desert, and as well as the sea coast. The regional and local variation within each biome lead to the formation of a wide variety of habitat. Okay, means remember, within the regional as well as local variation within the biome lead to the formation of wide variety of habitat. Now you have to remember that life just does not exist in the favorable conditions or favorable habitat, but it also exists in an extreme and harsh habitat such as the scorching desert, right? You can see here Rajasthan desert, and as well as in the perpetually rain soaked Meghalaya forest. Okay, not only here, right, you see that life also do exist in some of the harsh environment such as deep ocean trenches and as well as in case of torrential streams. Even here also life exists, or maybe organisms can be found even in these regions also, or in these habitats also. Okay, they are also found in the permafrost polar regions, and as well as they are found even in high mountains. Okay, not only here, right, you see that they are also present in the boiling thermal springs. Some bacteria are known to be present even in the boiling thermal springs. Okay, then life also exists in what called as the stinking compost pits. Okay, sinking compost nallu kuda life also exists, right. Our intestine also is known to contain a habitat for hundreds of species of microbes. Means in our intestine also there are hundreds of species of microbes living, which is said to be an unfavorable condition, but still in this condition also life do exist. Okay, so this is how we see that life not only exists in the favorable condition, but even in the unfavorable conditions also. Okay, now let us move on to the factors that are going to affect the survival and the reproduction of an organism. The survival of an organism depends upon the major factors, which you can classify them as abiotic and biotic factors. The abiotic factor mainly includes the temperature, the water, then the light. The fourth factor is the soil. So thus there are four abiotic factor: temperature, water, light and soil are the four major abiotic factors. Then what are the major what you call it as the okay, now you should remember, not only the physico-chemical factors alone characterize the habitat of an organism, but also you find abiotic components, I mean sorry, biotic components. What are the major biotic components? The major biotic components includes pathogens, parasites, okay, predators, and as well as the competitors. These all form the biotic they are the biotic components that are generally present in a habitat, which will help us to recognize, or maybe which enables the organisms to survive in a particular habitat, not only survive but also to reproduce. Okay, so let us go in detail about the first factor, that is temperature. Now, when you see temperature, temperature is the most ecological environmental factor. It observed that the average temperature on land varies seasonally, right? Decreases progressively from the equator towards the poles, from the plain to the mountain tops, and as well as from the sub-zero degree level to more than 50 degrees centigrade in the tropical desert in the summer. Okay, you have to remember temperature does not remain equal, but it varies seasonally. That then it is not same in the equator and pole. In the equator region the temperature is high, whereas in the polar region the temperature is very low, right? Remember, even what do you see, the temperature in the plain is again low, right, it is high, whereas when you go to the mountains again it reduces. So thus you see there is a variation in the temperature. Okay, now let us see about the what you call it as, depending upon this temperature, there are unique habitats also. Even in the thermal springs and deep sea hydrothermal vents, where the average temperature exceeds more than 100 degrees, remember, life do exist. Temperature is very high. Okay, now depending upon the temperature, even the organism, survival of the organism is seen. Okay, now in general, if you see example, a mango tree do not and cannot grow in the temperate countries like Canada and Germany. Why? Because the temperature is very, very low there. Okay, same way, right, you see that a snow leopard are not found in the Kerala forest. Why? Because they are adapted to live in a temperature which is very, very less. Okay, then when you see a tuna fish, you cannot catch them, or tuna fish cannot be caught beyond the tropical latitudes in the oceans. Okay, next, depending upon the temperature, right, you have to remember what is the effect of the temperature on the organism. The temperature can affect the kinetics of the enzyme, and through it the basal metabolism and other physiological functions of the organism. Depending on the ability to tolerate variations in the surrounding, the temperature of the surrounding temperature, organisms are of two types. One is the euthermal. They are the organisms which can tolerate high range of temperature. Okay, or you can tell wide range of temperature, example man, toad, lizard, as well as cyclops. Whereas the stenothermal, they are the organisms that tolerate a narrow range of temperature, that is fishes, corals, as well as the snails. Okay, the level of thermal tolerance of different species determine to a larger extent their geographical distribution. Means the geographical distribution of an organism mainly depends upon how much they are able to tolerate the temperature. Okay, now coming to the effect of temperature. First effect of the temperature, it is known to affect the growth in organism, especially in case of the oyster. Then it is known to control metabolism. Then reproduction, example in case of grasshopper, right, where temperature between 22 to 32 degrees centigrade, the laying of the eggs increases by 20 to 30 times. Then distribution of the organism also depends upon the temperature. Example is ice fish is generally found in cold water, whereas corals are found in warm water. Coloration, okay, animals have a dark skin in a warm and a humid region, whereas light skin in a arid and cold regions. And you call this as the Glaucus rule, right? The Glaucus rule says that animals in a warmer places have a dark skin, whereas a lighter skin in the arid cold areas. Then morphology. Okay, so temperature is also known to control morphology of the organism. Okay, right, taking the example of the snow bear, okay, and as well as the bear. Okay, in a colder region the animals have got a smaller size extremities. Why? It is mainly to increase sorry, it is mainly to reduce the loss of heat through their body. Okay, andre those animals which are living in a normal temperature, they have got a large extremities like the snout or the ear or the limbs, and you call this as the Allen's rule. Sex ratio, right? Temperature also is known to control the sex ratio. Okay, coming to the second factor, that is the water. In right, you should remember life on earth first originated in water and is said to be unsustainable. That is, life cannot be sustained without water. Its availability is so limited in the desert that only special adaptations make it possible to live there. The productivity and distribution of the plant is also heavily depending on water. Okay, right, we think that organism living in oceans, lakes, and rivers should not face any water related problem, but it is not true. For aquatic organisms, the quality of water becomes important, right? The quality of water becomes very important as far as the right, what you call it as mm, uh, for the survival of the organism, the chemical composition, especially pH. The salt water, right, especially if you see in right, you see that the salt concentration, right, the salt concentration, salinity, which is part per thousand, if it is less than 5 in inland water, 30 to 35 in the sea water, whereas more than 100% in some of the lagoons, hyper saline lagoons. Okay, so now depending upon this salinity, right, you see that there are two types of organisms. One is the right, one you see is the euryhaline. Some organisms which can tolerate to a wide range of salinity, right, you see that they are called as the euryhaline. And example for this is right, example for this you see is the salmon fish. Okay, salmon fish is known to right, tolerate a wide range of temperature, right? It is known to tolerate a wide range of temperature. Okay, right, now if you see about the second one is the stenohaline. The stenohaline are those organisms which are restricted to a narrow range of salinity. That is, they can tolerate only a narrow what you call it as a narrow range of salinity. They are called as the stenohaline, and example for this is the Carasus fish. Okay, it is known to what you call it as tolerate a very narrow range of salinity. Okay, right, so you see that depending upon the salinity, the organisms are being classified. Okay, so now let us see about the right, let us now see about the next the next factor regarding the water, right? Sir, what does water says? Okay, So if you see here is the next factor is about the light. The source of light for all organism on earth is sun. Light is the visible part of the electromagnetic spectrum. The amount of light and its intensity vary with the latitude and season. Light intensity, light duration, and high quality influence a number of life process of organism. Plants produce a food through photosynthesis, a process which is only possible when sunlight is available as a source of energy. Many species of small plants like herbs and shrubs growing in forests are adapted to photosynthesis optimal under a very low light condition, because they are constantly overshadowed uh, by tall canopied trees. Okay, right. The availability of light on land is closely linked with the temperature, since sun is the source for both. Means sun is the source for both light and as well as the temperature. The environment in dark, its inhabitants are not aware of the existence of the celestial source of energy called as the sun. Andre, the some of the organisms are living very deep inside the oceans, so they are living very much in the dark, where light cannot penetrate. So they are not even aware that there is a celestial source of energy called as the sun. Okay, so then what is the source of energy for these organisms which are living, right? The source of energy here is the chemosynthesis. The spectral quality of solar radiation is also important for life. The UV component of the spectra is harmful to many organisms. All the color components of the visible spectra are not available for marine plants living at different depths of the ocean. Okay, Hagage, right? Then how does algae, which algae inhabiting the deepest part of the sea is able to carry out photosynthesis? It is the red algae, as they contain a pigment such as phycobilins that utilize short wavelength, that is the blue light, that can penetrate deeper than other wavelength of the light. Okay, now coming to the effect of light. The first effect of the light is it is known to control the daily rhythm in animals. Depending upon this daily rhythm in the light, you see that organisms are classified as diurnal. They remain active during daytime, birds, butterflies, and mammals. Then nocturnal, they are known to be active during the nighttime, bat and owl. Then auroral, they are known to be active during the morning. Example is Bubalcus. Whereas crepuscular are those organisms or animals which are active during the dawn and dusk. Example is the rabbit. Now, light is also known to control photoperiodism. What do you mean by photoperiodism? It is a response of the organism to the duration of the day length. The timing of the seasonal activity of the organism, such as flowering migration, is called as the phenology. So, based on photoperiodism, we classify the plants, especially the plants, as short day plants. They flower during the when the length of the day is short, and the long day plants, they are the plants which flower during when the length of the day is long. Day neutral plants do not have any effect of light on them, so they flower during all the what you call it as the period of light. Okay, so that is photoperiodism. How does it affect in animals? Photoperiodism is important for animals, especially for foraging. What is foraging? The act of finding food is called as foraging. Especially birds, right? Whenever it is a daytime, they become active and they utilize this day, I mean the light, for foraging or maybe for finding their food. Secondly, the light is important for migration. Many organisms, they move away temporarily from the stressful habitat to a more hospitable area and return when the stressful period is over. You call it as migration. So light also affects migration, especially in the birds. Light also affect the reproduction. Animals like turkey and sterling breed in response to the lengthening of the day. Okay, when the length of the day is very long. Whereas goat and deer, they will breed only when the length of the day is short. Whereas there are some animals like rabbit and guinea pigs where they are neutral to the length of the day. Okay, next. Light is also known to affect photosynthesis. We know that plants are able to carry out photosynthesis only in the presence of light. Okay, so photosynthetic yield is maximum at equator and tropical areas. Light also depends upon, transpiration also depends upon the light, especially the opening and the closing of the stomata depends upon the light. So as a result, stomata open during the daytime, right? They are open during the daytime, whereas they close during the nighttime. You call this as the stomatal movement. Okay, the guard cells are able to open and they close, and as a result, transpiration occurs during the daytime, whereas transpiration does not occur during the night time. Light also affects the germination. A number of seeds are sensitive to light. They are called as photoblastic seed. Positive photoblastic seed germinate only in the presence of light. For example, viscum and rumax. Whereas negatively photoblastic seeds are those which germinate in the absence of, right, which do not germinate in the presence of the light. Example, onion and tomato. Light also affects the pigmentation. Many animals develop dark color in dim light, whereas light color in bright light. Plants they exhibit various types of movements towards the source of light. Small photosynthetic organisms show a positive phototaxic in the moderate light, Chlamydomonas, euglena, as well as volvox. Okay, plants shoot bend towards the source of light, and you call this as phototropism. Flowers of some plants open and close in response to the light and darkness, and this phenomena you call it as photonasty. The folding of leaves in response to the darkness is called as nyctinasty. Animal like planaria and earthworm generally show a negative phototaxy. Okay, now depending upon the light, especially in the water bodies like lakes and oceans, there are different zone, you call it as light zonation. Okay, there are two different zone. One is the littoral zone. It is a shallow coastal region, right, where the plants are seen growing. Whereas the limnatic zone, it is the open water zone where water is very deep. Limnatic zone is further divided into three parts, that is photic zone, aphotic zone, and benthic zone. Photic zone is the zone where the light penetrates, whereas aphotic zone light does not penetrate, whereas benthic zone completely where there is no light penetrating. Okay, so that is the bottom of the water bodies, maybe like the bottom of the ocean or maybe bottom of the lake, you call that as the benthic zone. Okay, now coming to the last and the fourth factor, that is the soil. Soil is the upper weathering humus containing part of the earth's surface which sustains the terrestrial plant life. The withered mineral matter is changed to soil by a process called as pedogenesis. The science of soil is called as pedology. The process of pedogenesis involves humification, alluviation, and illuviation. The nature and the property of the soil is different in different places, varies. It also depends upon the following factors like climate, the withering process, the whether the soil is transported or sedimentary, or whether the soil is soil development. Okay, next we have to see is the various characteristic of the soil, such as soil composition, grain size, then aggregation determines the percolation and water holding capacity of the soil. Remember, the soil, the nature of the soil depends upon the soil composition, grain size, that is the soil grain size, and as well as aggregation. But what does aggregation refers to? The ability of the soil to aggregate to resist degradation when exposed to the external forces, you call that as aggregation. Okay, so aggregation will have, all these factors will decide whether the soil has a water holding capacity or whether water percolates. These characters, along with the parameters such as pH, mineral composition, and topography, determines to a larger extent the vegetation in any area. Okay, now let us see about the soil profile. It is also important as far as your competitive exam is concerned. The appearance of a different layer of the soil superposed one above the other in a vertical section of the soil from downward to the parent rock is called as a soil profile. So when you see a soil profile, there are different layers of soil, and these layers are called as the horizons. Basically, you find three horizons. One is horizon A, horizon B, and horizon C. The surface which has got the lither layer is called as the zero horizon. Okay, sorry, the O horizon. The horizons are been further divided into sub horizons. Let us see about the O horizon. It is the surface layer of the organic matter which lies above the true soil. It has got two subzone. One is the A00 and another is the A0. Okay, A00 is the upper horizon, which contains freshly deposited organic debris of the fallen leaves, twigs, bark, animal remains, and animal excreta. Andre, these are all the organic matter of the plants and animals which are now deposited, freshly deposited. Whereas A0 is below the A00 layer. It contains organic matter which are at the various stages of decomposition. This decomposition ultimately produces a dark brown or a black colored amorphous substance called as the humus. A horizon, it is the uppermost horizon of the soil, which is called as the topsoil. It contains organic matter mixed with the humus. It is light in weight, spongy, dark in color. It is few centimeters to about 3 meter thickness. It is rich in microorganism. It is divisible into three sub horizon, A1, A2, A3. A1 is rich in organic matter and as well as organic nutrients. A2 is the area where a maximum leaching or elevation occurs. A3 is the transition zone between A and as well as B horizon. B horizon, it is also called as a subsoil. It receives the various materials reached from the topsoil. It is thus the area of deposit of material or elevation. The thickness is up to 1 meter. It is poor in aeration and biological activity. It is rich in plant nutrients including humus. It is differentiated into B1, B2 and B3. B1 is dark colored and humified. B2 contains deposits of inorganic nutrients, clay and heavy metals, whereas B3 is the transitional sub-horizon between B and C. C horizon, it contains irregular rock fragments. It is biological activity is nil. The horizon is saturated with the moisture and represents the water table. Unbroken and unwithered parent bedrock that lies below the C horizon. It is generally called as the R bedrock. Okay, so that was about the soil profile. Now coming to soil composition, there are basically five components. One is the mineral matter consisting of 40%, organic matter 10%, soil moisture 25%, soil atmosphere 25%, and as well as soil organism variable. Mineral matter, it consists of a small irregular particles formed by the withering of a parent rock. There are four types of mineral particles: gravels of 1 to 2 mm, then coarse sand, that is 0.2 to 2 mm, that is slightly large in size. Okay, then larger. Okay, then fine sand, 0.002 to 2 mm, silt 0.002 to 0.02 mm, then clay less than 0.002 mm. Okay, that is mineral. Depending upon these mineral present in the soil, remember we can see the soil texture. So depending upon the soil texture, right, you see we find three types of soil. What are these three types of soil? One is the sandy soil, second is the clay soil, another is the loamy soil. Sandy soil 80% sand, whereas 10% and 10% clay, silt. Clay soil, 40 to 50% you see is the clay and remaining you see is the sand and the silt. Loamy soil, if you see 40% of the sand, 40% of the silt and 20% of the clay, and as a result loamy soil is said to be more fertile and suitable for the growth of the plants. Then organic matter, it is derived from the organic remains over the soil surface like the fallen leaves, twigs, animal excreta and the dead bodies. Soil organism, it mainly comprises of bacteria, fungi, algae, insect, nematodes, worms, molluscans and burrowing vertebrates. Soil moisture, it mainly comprises of the water which is derived from the rain. Okay, the water that is held in the soil are of four types: gravitational water, that is generally drained off because of the gravitational force soon after irrigation and as well as the rain. Hygroscopic water, it is the water that imbibes the water that is imbibed by the soil colloids. Both the gravitational water, hygroscopic water are unavailable to the plants. Combined water, the water that occurs bound up in the chemicals, which is also unavailable to the plants. Capillary water, it is the water that is present in the micropores of the soil, and it is this soil, this is the water which is available to the plants. Okay, so that was about the uh, Abiotic factors. Now let us see about the response of the organism towards the abiotic factor. The abiotic conditions of many habitat keep on changing with the time, but the organisms try to maintain a constancy of their internal environment despite varying external environment by a process called as homeostasis. This constancy, for example, can be in terms of optimal temperature, or it can be in terms of osmotic concentration of the body fluid. Homeostasis is maintained through change in body change in the blood supply, excretion, and osmoregulation. To understand this concept of homeostasis, let us take an analogy or an example. Suppose a person is able to perform his or her best when the temperature is 25 degree and wish to maintain even when the under scorching hot sunlight and as well as under freezing cold outside. It can be achieved at home, in the car, or while or maybe at the work by using an air condition in the summer or heater in the winter. Then his and her performance would be always maximum regardless of the weather around him or her. Here the person homeostasis is accomplished, but not through physiological but artificial means. So this homeostasis is obtained through technology which occurs through expenditure of external energy. But if at all organisms have to maintain homeostasis internally through physiological process, then expenditure of internal energy is required. Okay, so thus you see that however, all organisms are not able to maintain homeostasis. Why? Because they are not able to spend so much of internal energy. Okay, so then how does the other organisms cope up with their situations? Okay, so now let us look at the various possibilities. What are the various possibilities? The response of the organism towards a change in the environmental conditions are regulate, conform, migrate, and suspend. Okay, so now what is regulate? Some organisms are able to maintain their constant internal environment by physiological and behavioral means, especially mammals. Mammals and as well as birds are able to maintain a constant internal environment. Okay, well, how it is? It is in terms of temperature, or it may be in terms of osmotic concentration. Okay, all birds and mammals and few lower vertebrates and invertebrates maintain a homeostasis by thermoregulation and osmoregulation. Animals having a regulated body temperature are called as homeotherms or endothermic, or they are called as warm-blooded. Thermoregulators have a high metabolic rate which enables the animal to be more active. Most vertebrates and a number of aquatic invertebrates are strict osmoregulators. If present in fresh water, they'll eliminate excess water, while in sea, they drink water to compensate the loss of water by exosmosis. Marine fishes also possess salt excreting glands. The success of the mammals is largely due to their ability to maintain a constant body temperature and thrive, whether they live in Antarctica or in Sahara Desert. Plants do not have such a mechanism to maintain the internal temperature. Hence, they have to go for the second response called as conformers. The majority, around 99% of animals and all plants cannot maintain a constant internal environment. So their body temperature keeps on changing with the change in the ambient temperature. So they are called as exotherms, or they are called as the poikilotherms. Aquatic animals, the osmotic concentration of the body fluid also keeps on changing with the ambient water osmotic concentration. Okay, so they are called as the conformers. Thermoregulation is energetically expensive for many organisms, especially with reference to small animals like shrews and mammals. Hence, they can tolerate the body temperature to a certain extent. Beyond that, they cannot tolerate, and they switch over to conformation. Why it is? It is mainly because these small animals have got a larger surface area relative to their volume, so they tend to lose more body heat very fast. So when it is cold outside, they have to spend much energy to generate body heat. So this is the main reason why small animals are rarely found in polar region. There are some organisms which are intermediate between conformers and regulators. They maintain homeostasis up to a certain limit, beyond which they behave like conformers, and they are known as partial regulators, aquatic invertebrates. So coming to the third response is migration. The organisms, what is migration? It is the movement of organisms temporarily from a stressful habitat to a comfortable habitat and return back when the favorable conditions reappear. Example, a person moving from Delhi to Shimla for the duration of summer, or it may be birds who during the winter take a long distance migration and move to a hospitable area. Example is the golden plover. Okay, another example you can see is the Siberian cranes, which generally move during the winter to the famous Kilardo National Park that is situated in Bharatpur in Rajasthan. Okay, so that is migration. Then coming to the last response, that is suspend. Some bacteria, fungi and lower plant undergo unfavorable conditions, slow down their metabolic activity and form a thick walled spores to overcome stressful condition. So in higher plant, seeds and some other vegetative reproductive structures also reduce their metabolic activity and undergo a state of dormancy. In animals, if unable to migrate and to avoid stressful condition, they escape in time. That is, polar bear undergo hibernation called as winter sleep, whereas some of the snails and fishes, they undergo summer sleep, which is called as estivation. Many of the protozoan species in lakes and ponds, they are known to enter a diapause. What is diapause? It is a stage of suspended development. Okay, so that was about the what called as the response of the organism towards the abiotic factor. Now let us see about adaptations. Any morphological, physiological and behavioral attribute of an organism that enables to it to survive and reproduce in its habitat, you call that as an adaptation. Many adaptations have evolved over a long evolutionary time through mutation and recombination and are now genetically fixed. There are two types of adaptation. One is phenotypic. What are phenotypic adaptation? They are the favorable changes in morphology and physiology which develop in response to change in environmental condition. They disappear when environmental condition become normal. The phenotype variant formed in a population due to change in environment are called as ecophytes, or they are called as ecarts. Right? Desert plants having thick cuticle and sunken stomata are the example for phenotypic adaptation. What is genotypic adaptation? They are the genetic variation which enable a population to adapt itself to a particular habitat and environmental condition, and the variants are called as the ecotype. Different skin type as well as hair color in human beings are the example. Now let us see about the morphological adaptation that you see in case of the desert animal called as a kangaroo rat. Okay, so kangaroo rat is able to compensate the water or the need for the water to internal oxidation, fat oxidation. Okay, and it is able to excrete a concentrated urine so that minimal water is being removed, or maybe you can tell minimal water is being used for the removal of excretory products. Adaptation of animals in colder climate. Mammals from the colder climate generally have a shorter ears and limbs to minimize the heat loss. This is called as the Allen's rule. Whereas in the polar sea, aquatic mammals like a seal, they have a thick layer of fat that is called as the blubber below their skin that acts as an insulator and reduce the loss of body heat. Adaptation that you see in the desert plants. Many desert plants have a thick cuticle on their leaf surface and have their stomata arranged in a deep pit to minimize the water loss through transpiration. That is, the stomata are present in the what you call it as the sunken stomata. They have got the sunken stomata, and some plants have got a special type of photosynthetic pathway called as the chrysolacin acid metabolism. Right, in these plants the stomata open during the night and close during the daytime. Desert plants like opentia, remember the leaves are reduced into spines, whereas the photosynthetic activity has been taken up by the stem, which has been modified into a thick succulent structure called as the phylloclade. Then after apart from xerophytic adaptation, we have other adaptation like helophytes, the plants which grow in bright light. Sciophytes, those which are growing in low intensity of light, they are shade loving plants. Halophytes, which are generally growing in the saline habitat. Mangroves are the example. Hydrophytes are the plants which are growing in water. Hydrilla and pistia are the example. Physiological adaptation, taking the example of human beings. Some organisms possess adaptation that are physiological, which allow them to respond quickly to a stressful situation. In a low atmospheric pressure of high altitude like Rotang Pass near Manali and Manasarovar in China, now occupied by Tibet, you experience what called as altitude sickness. What are the symptoms of altitude sickness? Nausea, fatigue, and heart palpitation. Why does these symptoms are seen? It is mainly because of the body does not get the enough oxygen. Then how does mm, uh, the body compensates? Right, the body compensates by increasing the red blood cell production, decreasing the binding affinity of the hemoglobin, and by increasing birth rate. Many tribes live in the high altitude of Himalayas. Usually they have got a higher red blood cells than the people who are living in the plains. Biological adaptation. In most animals, the metabolic reaction proceeds optimally in a narrow temperature. But there are some organisms where the metabolism occurs even at a very high temperature, that is more than 1000 degrees. These organisms generally flourish in hot springs and deep sea hydrothermal vents. They are nothing but the Archaeobacteria. So how do they able to adapt themselves? It is because of the presence of a thermostable enzymes. Many fishes thrive in Antarctica water where the temperature is always below zero. How do they manage to keep their body fluid from freezing? It is because of producing certain chemicals, okay, like glycerol and as well as special enzymes called as anti-freezing proteins. Okay, so that was about the biochemical adaptation. Now behavioral adaptation that is seen is especially in case of the desert lizard. So usually these lizard, they busk in the sun when the temperature of the body is low, and once the body temperature goes on increasing, they go and burrow themselves in the sand, and thus they reduce their body temperature. This is called as a behavioral adaptation that is generally seen in desert lizards. Okay, so I have already explained. Some of the animals are known to show camouflage. What is camouflage? It is the ability of the animal to blend with the surrounding so that they will escape from their predators. Okay, right, it is mainly to remain unnoticed and protect themselves from the predator. Example, butterflies and grasshoppers as well as insects. Some of the insects are known to show this type of adaptation called as camouflage. Okay, students, we have seen about adaptation. Let us quickly see about population. What does population refers to? A group of individuals living in a well-defined geographical area that are able to share or compete for a similar resources, potentially having and are have the ability to interbreed. Example, rat in an abundant area, teakwood in a forest area, bacteria in a culture plate, lotus in a pond are some of the examples of population. Population level, the natural selection operates to evolve a desired character. Population ecology is called as the demicology, right? It is an important area of ecology which generally links ecology to population, genetics, and as well as evolution. Now coming to the attributes of population. Okay, what are the attributes, or what are the what you call it as the characteristic of a population? A population has got population density, natality, mortality, and as well as age distribution. Okay, so what does natality refers to? It refers to birth rate. Okay, birth rate and death rate refers to death rate refers to mortality. Birth rate and death rate refers to per capita birth and death respectively. Okay, I have already told you natality refers to birth rate. Okay, so if in a pond there are 20 lotus last year, and through reproduction 8 new plants have been added, so the current population is 28. So how do you calculate the birth rate? Birth rate can be calculated by an equation: number of individual added divided by total mid-year population. Number of individuals added was 8. What was the previous year population of the lotus? It was 20. So when you divide, you get 0.4. So 0.4 is the birth rate or the natality of spring per lotus per year. Similarly, mortality, number of death per year per thousand of a population, per capita death in a population. It is denoted by number of death in a population divided by total year population. So again, taking the example, if there are 4 individuals of fruit fly in a laboratory, okay, 40 fruit flies have, 4 individuals in the population of, there are 40 fruit flies. In that, 4 individuals have died in a week. Then what would be the death rate? It would be 0.1 individual per fruit fly per year. Okay, so that is about mortality. Sex ratio. So the number of female per thousand of a male population in a given time period, or the number of female per thousand male population, you call it as sex ratio. According to those 2001 census reveals that out of 1000 males, the ratio of female was 933. Then age distribution, fourth attribute. Ecologically, a population has got 3 types of age groups: pre-reproductive, reproductive, and post-reproductive. A population having large number of young individuals shows a positive growth. A population with large number of old age individuals shows a negative growth. Accordingly, we have got 3 types of age pyramids. Okay, so the age pyramid can be expanding, right, or it can be stable, or it can be declining. So an expanding population, remember the age pyramid would be a triangular, whereas for a stable population, the age pyramid would be bell shaped, whereas for a declining population, the age pyramid would be urn shaped pyramid. Now coming to population density, the size of the population tells a lot about its status. The size of the population in nature would be low, that is less than 10 Siberian crane in a Bharatpur wetland, or it can go up millions like the Chlamydomonas. Okay, population size is more, we can calculate in terms of population density. Population size need not be measured in number alone, but it can be even in terms of biomass also, taking the example of a banyan tree. Okay, in such cases, the biomass is more meaningful measure of the population, as I have already told you all, right? Another example for showing that population can be also measured in terms of biomass is example of a bacteria that is grown in a Petri plate in a laboratory condition. Okay, how is population density calculated? With the help of a equation, right, where D is equal to N by S. D refers to population density, N refers to number of individual, whereas S refers to a specific area. Then for certain investigation, there is no need to know absolute population. Relative population is just enough. Okay, for example, now there is a lake, and you need not know all the population of the fishes that are present in the pond, but the relative population, that is what is the number of the fishes that have been caught, is just enough to calculate the population of that fishes in that particular area. Okay, so then the population size can be estimated indirectly without counting. That is, we are able to find out the size of the population by just counting the pug marks and as well as the fecal matter. Especially this strategy has been used in the tiger census in our national parks as well as tiger reserves. Now coming to population growth, right, remember the size of the population, right, increase over a period, and it also depends upon factors like food availability, predator pressure, and weather conditions. Okay, so depending upon that, remember there are 4 factors that will that help in population growth: natality, mortality, immigration, and emigration. Immigration, individual of the species, they come into habitat from elsewhere. Emigration, people who number of individual who move out from a habitat to somewhere else in a given period time. Okay, so thus the population density can be calculated as NT plus B plus I. B refers to birth rate, I refers to immigration, whereas D is death rate plus emigration. Okay, now let us see about the growth model. There are 2 types of growth model. One is called as exponential or geometric growth model, whereas second is the logistic or the sigmoid growth curve. Exponential growth curve, when the resources, the availability is obviously essential. Okay, when there is unlimited resources available in an habitat, then you see that there is an increase in the population. Okay, so there is no limit for the growth of the population of any species, but this growth is not said to be very realistic. Okay, they show an exponential growth. Exponential growth can be represented by equation dn by dt is equal to b minus d. B refers to birth rate, d refers to death rate into n. Okay, let us take b minus d as r. So then dn by dt is equal to Rn. But what does R refers to here? R here refers to intrinsic rate of the natural increase. The R value of a Norwegian rat is 0.015, whereas for the floral beetle is 0.12, whereas for human, according to 1981 year, remember it is 0.0250. Okay, 205. So the integral formula for the exponential growth is n0 ert. Nt is equal to n0 ert, where nt is population density at time t, n0 is population density at time 0, r is the intrinsic rate of natural increase, e is the base of the natural logarithm. Okay, so you can see here the the species growing exponential under unlimited resources condition can reach enormous population density. Okay, example, the lemming of tundra, and as well as some insect, as well as algal bloom. This was been explained by taking the example of a king and a minister who had a debate, and right, you see that the minister, by playing a chess game, okay, minister won. Okay, right, so exponential growth, and exponential growth can be even exhibited by a planaria, right? When there is unlimited resources, a planaria divides by binary fission to form 2, 2 will form 4, 4 will form 8, 8 into 16, then 32, like that the number goes on increasing. Okay, the resources become limited at a certain period where population cannot grow exponentially. Hence, remember, the what you call it as the exponential growth is not said to be realistic. So let us see about the second growth called as the logistic growth. Right, logistic growth is the realistic growth. Remember, in any ecosystem, the resources are very limited. Okay, so limited resources to support a particular maximum number of individual, you call it as the carrying capacity. Okay, so and a logistic growth curve, or the sigmoid growth, is being shown by yeast cells as well as human population. This growth is also called as the Wernhulst-Pearl logistic growth curve. Okay, a population growing in an habitat with the limited resources shows initially, you call it as lag phase, population slowly increases, then there is an accelerated growth of the population grows drastically, then it deaccelerates, that is, it slows down, and then the population growth completely stops. Okay, so the logistic growth is represented by a formula called as dn by dt is equal to Rn, taken into bracket by as k minus n by k. N is the population density at time t, R is the intrinsic rate of the natural increase, K is the carrying capacity. Okay, since resources for growth for most of the population are finite and become limited sooner or later, the logistic growth model is considered to be more realistic. Okay, so now let us say about life history variation and as well as population interaction. Okay, population evolved to maximum depending upon their reproductive fitness, and this you call it as a Darwinian fitness, and it has been represented as R value. Under a particular set of selection pressures, organisms evolve towards the most efficient reproductive strategies. Okay, some organisms are able to breed only once in their lifetime, example bamboo, and as well as Pacific salmon fish. Okay, whereas the other animals are able to breed during their lifetime, most of the birds and mammals. Some produce a large number of small sized offsprings like oyster and pelagic fishes, whereas other produce a small number of large sized offsprings, birds and mammals. Okay, so depending upon that, you see that it is the biotic and the abiotic factor which are known to influence the organism's reproduction, you can tell. So as a result, you find two types of growth population, which is R selection and another is K selection. R selection, resources are abundant, natality is high, size of the individual is small, but the population seldom reaches the carrying capacity. Okay, right? And group loyalty and parenting are lacking in the R selection. Whereas in K selection, though the natality is low, individual size is large, longevity is high, so that the population exist at the carrying capacity, and they are well developed. Okay, so you see that it is called as the K selection on wolf. So in nature you can see that the K selection is the one which is known to help in the process of reproduction. There is no natural habitat on earth that is inhibited by a single. Let us now see about population interaction. Okay, no, there is no, on the face of the earth there is no single species that can exist. Single species never exist. Okay, in nature, plants, animal, microbes, all they do interact. Okay, they never live in isolation. Okay, so there are, this you call it as interaction, population interaction. There are two types of population interaction. One is the intraspecific and another is the interspecific interaction. Okay, then the interaction could be either beneficial or it could be what you call it as detrimental, that is harmful, or it could be neutral. When it is beneficial, you give a positive sign. If it is if it is harmful, that is detrimental, negative, and if it is neutral, 0. Okay, so there are different types of population interaction. One is predation, competition, parasitism, commensalism, mutualism, and amensalism. Okay, predation, right? It is a type of interaction wherein one organism is benefited whereas the other one is being harmed. Okay, the one who is called as the predator will catch, kill, and devour the individual of the other species, which is called as the prey. Okay, right? So some of the examples of predation you can see is the Nepenthes. Then second you can see is the herbivorous plants, I mean herbivores feeding on the plants. Insects are also considered to be an example of predators. Okay, now let us see the importance of a predation. Predation will help in transfer of energy across the trophic levels. Second, it is known to control the prey population. Third, it is known to help in controlling the what you call it as species diversity, okay, in an ecosystem. Okay, so examples are important here, students. Okay, exotic species for example, now remember, exotic species does not have a natural predator, so hence they go on spreading. So one of the example you can see is the prickly pear cactus that was been introduced in Australia in 1920, created a very havoc and a problem until and unless a predator was being introduced in the form of a moth. Okay, so hence predation is being used as a biological control method in agriculture pest control. Okay, right? It is because of the ability of the predator to regulate the prey population. Predator also help in maintaining, I have told you, species diversity. Example is the Pisaster starfish. When Pisaster starfish was when experimentally removed, right, we could see that more than 10 species from that particular area, they became extinct because of the competition. Okay, so one of the best example for to show that predators are help in maintaining diversity. If a predator is too efficient and over exploits the prey, then the prey might become extinct and the predator will also become extinct. Remember, because of this reason, the predators are called as prudents. Andre, they will not completely destroy the prey that are present in a particular habitat. Okay, now let us see about some of the defense that have been evolved in the prey in order to defend themselves against the predators. Okay, camouflage. Okay, example for this is the monarch butterfly. Camouflaging example is the insects and the frogs. Whereas some of the species of insects, they are poisonous and they are being avoided by predator. Example for this is the monarch butterfly. Okay, in plants, remember what are the defense? They have got physical defense or morphological defense in the form of thorns or spines. Okay, whereas chemically also they defend themselves by producing certain chemicals. Especially example, when you see Calotropis, it is known to produce cardiac glycoside against the herbivores. Some of the chemicals that have been produced like nicotine, caffeine, quinine, then strychnine, opium are being produced by the plant against as a defense against the grazers as well as the browsers. Mimicry is another important defense against the predators, protect themselves against the predators. Okay, two types of mimicry, Batesian mimicry and another is a Mullerian mimicry. Coming to competition, right? It is an active demand or by two or more individuals of the same species or the members of two or more species at the same trophic level for a common resource. Means there is a competition for the same resources. Two types of competition, interspecific and intraspecific competition. Okay, so I'm not just telling you the differences here. Interspecific competition we are going to highlight. Okay, so interspecific, first of all, remember it is not only between unrelated, I mean related species, it can be even between unrelated species also. Example, American lake visited by flamingos, right, compete with the fishes for the same food, that is zooplankton. Secondly, you should remember competition will not arise because of the limited resources, but because of the introduction also. Example, abundant tortoise in Galapagos Island became extinct within a decade after goats were being introduced in the island. You will examples of an Perle, because they can be asked in your competitive exams. Okay, then coming to the third is a competitive release. Remember, if there is a superior species, right, the inferior will be restricted to a very small geographical area, which was been experimentally proved by Connell's elegant experiment, right? Balanus, right, there are two types of barnacles. One is the Balanus, whereas another is the Cathameles. Balanus were dominating over the Cathameles, but when Balanus were experimentally removed, only for the field experiment, you could see that Cathameles, they started expanding over intertidal area. Okay, this shows that that the inferior one will generally occupy a very restricted area, or right, geographical area. Gauge competitive exclusion principle. Two closely related species compete for the same resources cannot coexist indefinitely. The competitive inferior one will be eliminated. This is what Gauss competitive exclusion principle says. But this is not true, because through various experiments it is seen that through an evolution, you see that majority of the organisms or the species, they have evolved a certain mechanism to promote coexistence rather than exclusion. And the best example for this is the warbers. You call this as resource partition. Okay, it was been first observed by Mac Arthur. Okay, means the warblers living on the same tree, they avoided competition and coexisted due to their behavioral difference in their foraging activity, that is competition. Coming to parasitism, parasitism is an interaction between two species where one species is benefited whereas the other is harmed. The one which is benefited is a parasite, whereas the one who is harmed is the host. Parasitic mode of life ensures free lodging as well as the meals. Some parasites are host specific. Okay, they have evolved in such a way that both host and parasite both have tend to evolve. Some of the parasitic adaptation: loss of unnecessary sense organs, presence of adhesive organs like suckers, then loss of digestive system, high productive capacity. Parasites have got one or more intermediate hosts, example liver fluke and as well as malarial parasite, that is Plasmodium. Parasite always harms the host. They reduce their survival. I mean, this is the effect of the parasite on the host. They reduce the survival growth and reproduction of the host, reduces its population density. They make the host more vulnerable to the predators by making it physically weak. Two types of parasite: ectoparasites and endoparasite. Ectoparasites, they feed on the external surface of the host. Example lies on human, teak on dogs, marine fishes that are infested with the copepods. Cuscuta, a parasitic plant that grows on the hedge plant. Endoparasites, those are which live inside the host body. Okay, their life cycle is more complex. Morphological and nautical features are generally simplified. They are highly developed reproductive system. There is a third type of parasitism called as brood parasitism. It is a parasitism in which a parasitic bird lays its egg in the nest of the host and let the host to incubate them. The egg of the host is very much similar to the egg of the host, the parasite. So example for this is the cuckoo and as well as the crow. Okay, now coming to the commensalism, only we are going to see some of the examples of commensalism. But before that, what is commensalism? It is an interaction between two organisms where one species is benefited, whereas the other is neither benefited nor harmed. Example for the commensalism: epiphyte growing on the that is orchids, which are said to be epiphytes growing on the mango branch. Clownfish living among the tentacles of the sea anemone. Barnacles on the back of the whales. Then that is cattle egg rats and the grazing cattles. Okay, right. So what is the importance of commensalism? Right, we will see with reference to two examples. The egret always forage close to where the cattle are grazing, because they move, the cattle they move, stir up and flush out the insects that are present in the plants, which which is difficult for the egrets to find and catch them. The second example, Nalli, the clownfish lives among the tentacles of the sea anemone. The fish gets the protection from the predator, which stays away from the stinging tentacles, whereas the sea anemone does not appear to derive any benefit from the host, that is the clownfish. Mutualism. It is a mutual beneficial interaction or relationship between the individuals of the two different species in which both are benefited, where none are capable of living separately. Okay, mutualism and symbiosis are synonyms. The association is obligatory, that is necessary for the existence of both. Formerly, symbiosis was considered to be mutualism, which involves close physical contact. Symbiotic relationship may be for the food, shelter, substratum, or maybe for the transport. Mutualism is an interaction between two living organisms. Both are equally benefited and no one is harmed. Example, lichens. In the lichens, you can see that there is a symbiotic association or mutual relationship between fungus and the photosynthetic algae or cyanobacteria. Second example you see is the mycorrhiza. Okay, in lichens you can see the fungal part is called as mycobiont, the algal part is called as phycobiont. Second example you see is the mycorrhiza. It is a relationship between the fungi and the roots of the higher plants. The fungus help the plant in absorption of essential nutrients from the soil, whereas the plant in turn provides fungi with the energy yielding carbohydrates. The third example is between plant and animal relationship. Okay, the most spectacular and evolutionary fascinating example of mutualism are found in plant animal relationship. Plant needs the help of animal for pollinating their flowers and dispersal of the seed, and the animal obviously have to be paid the fees for the service that the plant expect from them. So the plants offer reward or the fees in the form of pollen and nectar for the pollinators, and whereas the juicy and nutritious fruits for the dispersal of the seeds. Okay, so there is one relationship between the wasp and the fig, okay, which is said to be very much specific, and it has been evolved through the course of time. Okay, the female wasp uses the fruit both as a oviposition, that is to lay the eggs, and as well as the developing seeds for feeding its larva. The wasp pollinates the fig inflorescence while searching for the suitable egg laying site. In turn, the fig offers the wasp some of its developing seed as a food for the developing larva. Okay, let us see another important example of mutualism that is seen in case of orchid. It is called as a sexual deceit. It is a process of pseudo copulation that is seen. Orchids show a bewildering or maybe a surprising diversity of floral pattern, okay, which have got evolved to attract a right pollinator, that is the bees and the bumblebees. These ensure a guaranteed pollination but without any reward. Mediterranean orchid, that is Ophrys, employs sexual deceit, where the petals of the flower resemble the female bee. So the male bee get attracted towards this flower and pseudo copulates with the flower, and in the course, right, pollinates the flower. Okay, so this you call it a pseudo copulation. Then coming to proto cooperation, it is an association between two organisms where mutually they are benefited, but the association is non obligatory, that is not necessary for their existence. Okay, the association is seen between hermit crab and sea anemone. Okay, whereas second example you see is between a rhinoceros and as well as the birds. It's important, right? This is also important as far as your exam is concerned. Lastly, let us see about amensalism. In amensalism, one organism inhibits the effect of the other. Okay, where one organism is harmed, whereas the other organism is neither benefited nor harmed. Okay, the association is seen between a fungi and bacteria. Right, example is penicillium. Penicillium is a fungi which is known to produce a antibiotic substance called as penicillin, by which it inhibits the growth of bacteria. Okay, antibiosis is the production of a harmful secretion by the organism which are harmful to the other organism. Okay, so these antibiotics are harmful substances that are secreted by the fungi include like penicillin, streptomycin, aureomycin, etc. The process of preventing the growth of the other organism through their secretion of toxic substance, you call it as allelopathy. Okay, so thus we have completed with the synopsis for organisms and population. All the best, students. Thank you.